So, I think we've been hit with the plague. There are a lot of people who are not well at this time. There's something kind of going around. So I know of at least a few people who aren't going to be with us tonight, but we will wait for the camera so they can go back and look at it.
That's why this is all happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're just.
Yeah, all the first rowers are out.
That's true. Yeah, did the Clarks get it?
I think they're kids.
Their kids, yeah, my kids. My kids have it, or two of them did. I think one of them maybe had it last week. I don't know what. Yeah, it just kind of does, so. Okay. Yes, exactly. So before we get started on this week's stuff, the House Broad or Clan Broad. Alex, you had a question from last week, right?
Yeah, and then more for this week.
And,
But yeah, I know. So, yeah, this is on the gift giving.
yeah, and we didn't get to that last week, so
Right.
this is.
Oh, this one. So this mainly kind of pertains to the, because he kind of outlines like 8 different characteristics of gift giving. And let's see, this was on. I'm looking at it, I'm not seeing it. Well, this is mainly kind of on like the obligation to reciprocate, but then also, I kind of see the connections he's making from personal, or like from person to person kind of sense, but when you try to, I kind of lose it a little bit when you sort of apply this gift giving sense to your relationship with God. So namely, like, I think of the parable with, the workers out in the field, and they all come at different times, but at the end of the day, they receive the same wage, and that sort of equates to, we're all seeking the same, the same gift, but we're putting in, we're all different levels of givers. I guess I'm not seeing, I'm trying to remember this from last week, but there's also the idea that really, when we offer things to God, it's like, there's not any, there's nothing we can really give or do to kind of, win his sort of, favor, right? I mean, probably just take that to an extreme where it's like, you just accept the gift because it's free.
Right.
But to that earlier part, we still, my understanding, we still hold to that. So it's like, and kind of in his eyes, we're all equal givers and all equal sinners. And so this idea of this relationship with God, where we're receiving, we're offering sacrifices to varying degrees that are symbols of ourselves, and then supposed to be like receiving gifts from God, and that are increasing subjective value, and so there's this like you're just continually giving and receiving and fostering this relationship. I guess I just don't really see how that how that plays out in a liturgical sense. It seems a bit more obvious from a relationship with each other.
Right.
Gifts of service, gifts of, I think, like, the love language is
Right.
various ways that we love each other.
So-
I had it much more specific, or much more collected last week, but,
So when you say you don't see how this plays out liturgically, tell me more about what you mean by that, if you can.
So, Christ in the greatest of all these commandments is to love, and where, and so to that extent, it's like, we're all seeking the same gift of salvation, we're all working towards the same, end goal, so to speak. And so it seems like there's a finite you could give each you can sacrifice each in accordance with their own, but all of that is towards receiving the same gift. So and in his and I was saying in God's eyes, none of our sins are any better or worse than our peers, and actually we're always trying to humble ourselves and say and not put ourselves above another person. We say I'm a sinner, I'm chief among sinners actually. So it's I guess it's fascinating that where I'm kind of losing it.
Well, wasn't part of it, Alex, that you were trying to figure out how that we're not really capable of giving God something, in other words, from ourselves, we cannot give God anything that is truly of value. Or something along that line.
Well, I mean,
we could give our best gift possible, which by comparison to each other is going to vary, but in the eyes of God it's the same and equally insufficient.
I mean, I might challenge that it is insufficient perhaps in a material sense, because God is immaterial, but I think one of the points he tries to make, he talks about intent and
Yeah, the thought that counts.
and yeah, the thought that counts, exactly. And so I think, we can, easy example, or it's halfway formed in my mind. I think it's easy. We'll try. Let's see where it goes. All right, your mom, your wife, she's been given a gift. She bakes. She uses perhaps her resources, both God-given and monetary, to go get supplies. She bakes prosphora. She brings it to the church. That's a gift. That's her offering. That in turn, God turns around and uses that, and it becomes the body of Christ, which is then given back to her. And so that which she has given, the meager things that we bring God, are simple offering. God takes, he turns it into something far better than we could ever hope to give him. And yet, I think we can say we both were blessed in a way. I'm not speaking strictly theologically, but in the sense that no, we bless God. We give him a gift from our heart. We give him something, and he takes it and turns it into something far greater. But am I thinking along the same lines you're thinking? Slightly.
Yeah,
Near there.
Yeah, that seems in the ballpark.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually think that's helpful. because it's, I think there's a couple of things that have been just said in the last couple of minutes that are helpful. One is reminding me that it has to do with the intent of our heart. You know, I mean, you could do it, she could bake the bread and provide it as a matter of pride
Sure.
or showiness or whatever.
And the thing is I mean, done in the right heart, God accepts that offering. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody who bakes prosphora with impure thoughts, like, or not impure thought, like without pure motives, that doesn't mean everyone else can't receive that gift. But I mean, to receive the actual blessing, like, it's the purity of your own heart, it seems like. And I think he kind of covered that a little bit more in, I don't know, chapter 4 or chapter 5. He definitely talked.
Well, see, exactly,
Yeah.
that's why I said what he was talking about ties into 4.
Yes, yeah, when he talks about Cain and Abel.
Exactly, because that's where my struggle is. It's like when I was listening to my son, he shared with me last week, I'm going like, oh my gosh, this connects exactly what my struggle is, because I'm thinking like, okay, I tithe, but when I read what was read in chapter 4 about Cain and Abel, I realized that I've spent a lot of my life tithing like Cain, not like Abel. I mean, I'm just being honest here. But, you know, and I will tell you, since I've read that chapter, I have rethought everything I do. I mean, I've actually had conversations with God about, like, I'm really sorry. like I always pay my bills and then I give you, you know, I mean, this stuff like that. And so I'm just realizing I need to really rewire the way my brain works, and to realize that, no, I need to just believe God and his promise, give him the first slice, and let the rest of it, which I can almost hear Reader Moses in my head right now.
Yeah.
But you know, that kind of thing. Tithing is just one example.
Yeah.
But there's other things as well. And because I do so much out of a sense of obligation or sense of duty. And yeah, it's just kind of turned things upside down in my head.
Well, I think that's a good way segue to one of the questions. What are some ways that selfishness like Cain's undermines religion today? And what ways has it undermined your own religious life? You've already answered, but we can open it up to others.
I think of the preachers who say, give your last $10 to God and you'll be blessed 100 times over. And I tried that once, and it doesn't necessarily work. But it's the thought of giving so that we can get something back.
Yeah.
Which is not what sacrifice
Yeah, that's just
is all
manipulation.
about.
Yeah.
And it's detrimental to our own spiritual growth.
I think I kind of mentioned something similar like a few weeks ago, like one of our first chapters, that it feels that there's a tendency to make it feel, or to make it just transactional, you know, not relational. That was like one of the first things we talked about. And it's like, you can just so easily be like, you know, deal or no deal kind of thing.
Well, and that was, the chapters are all running, but when he's talking about one of the sacrifices, the one where you pressed your hand upon the neck of the goat, and it was like, some people have theorized that this is the act of like transferring your sin, and then the goat dies on your behalf, and the sin's taken care of, and he's like, you know, he makes the point again, like, this isn't a transactional, it's not a transactional thing, it's like, this was a joyful feast, like, this was something very different than, but I'm jumping ahead, something very different than the Day of Atonement, in which an animal didn't die.
Today is the day of atonement.
I know.
Oh, it is Yom
Yeah.
Kippur, it's Yom Kippur, right?
Yeah, it's Yom
Finished,
Kippur,
right?
yeah. Today is Yom
Finished
Kippur.
tonight.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
That's right.
That's one of the released the other ones in the wild.
Yes,
After-
the scapegoat, yeah. Anyone else, any other thoughts on that?
I like how in the chapter he brings it to I could give one example of the Greeks, sort of had like their origin stories, as he put it, for sacrifices, and that they ended up being more about mankind's manipulation of the gods, or trying to trick them as in the sacrifice where the gods and men were meeting together, and we got stuff like the good meat inside of the stomach, and then put all the bones in the back.
Yes.
It's just an interesting idea that we kind of think of God that way, as like, asking this sacrifice of us, or even, like our old ideas of, Christ being punished on the cross, just, I don't know, just these brutal ideas of who God is and what he wants from our life. Not that it's a blessing that we want to give him because he's, we recognize his blessings toward us.
Yeah. And again, it kind of goes to the manipulation or a transactional relationship where, like that story, it was Hesiod, I think, and it was, talking about, they tricked Zeus, like it was ultimately, but like, I mean, whether we know it or not, or realize it or not, I mean, we probably engaged in at least similar thoughts, maybe not mechanistically the same behaviors, but perhaps the same behaviors, the same spirit of behaviors.
Frankly, the Christian context that I grew up in was very, in hindsight, very manipulative. Because it was all about, like, if you do, well, kind of speaking what you were saying, like, if you do the things that God wants you to do, then this is what you're gonna get out. So it was always, it was always focused on what's in it for me.
Right.
Which is great when you're talking about training people on something at work, but it's terrible when you're talking about your relationship with God, right? So, but that's really how I was raised. I was raised with always thinking about, like, this is why I'm doing this, because like the payoff is for me.
Yeah.
And that got extended into the health and wealth doctrines that some of my friends got into, naming and claiming stuff, for those who might be familiar with it. But anyway, I'm just saying, that's just been my particular experience.
I had a Sunday school teacher. I mean, and again, there's the health and wealth. There's like the overt health and wealth doctrine, and then there's covert health and wealth doctrine as well. And sometimes, sometimes it's so ingrained in us that we don't even know it's there. But I mean, overtly, I remember having a Sunday school teacher when I was probably like, 6th or 7th grade. And he said, God wants you guys to be rich because the church gets money from the tithe. So like, he gets more money if you're rich. And it's like, oh wow, like, and then, changed my life. Then I listened to U2's Rattle and Hum, where he says, Bonham says, the God I serve isn't short on cash. Sorry. Listen to Rattle and Hum if you you have my blessing. Actually, but there are more covert, even within our own church. If I grow up in the church, follow church teachings, live a chaste life, I'm going to find another person who's done the same thing, and we're going to have a great marriage. People think that's a guarantee. It's not a guarantee.
That's my wife.
If I tithe, we're always going to have enough money at the end of the month. Not always true. So it doesn't always work that way. And yet, there's grace in all of that. It's kind of, is everybody happy with our discussion on chapter 4? I don't wanna lose chapter 5. Any other questions on chapter 4, any other thoughts? I feel like that was kind of a setup for what he kind of gets into in chapters 5 and 6.
I'm not sure that the one thing I struggled with was this idea of the impulse to make offerings to God was implanted in our nature by God. I did not connect with that at all.
Hmm.
I just, like, help me understand how that's real and true. I know I'm not trying to be a skeptic,
No.
it just didn't ring for me at all.
So I think, I mean, he takes you back to the very beginning with Cain and Abel. And the sacrifices weren't explained, there was no, like, we don't know how mechanistically those sacrifices worked, we just know they were given to God. And I think one of his points is that it's this sort of assumed idea, that people in the ancient Near East, in reading that, would have just kind of had enough of an understanding. Oh yeah, sacrifice, that makes sense. So I mean, he takes you through that, and then I think the point that he was kind of trying to make was that it's such a wide practice, especially in the ancient Near East and Greek antiquity and all of that, that there's something innate within us that desires relationship through sacrificial means.
And my thought when I read that was that, yeah, and then there's the flood, where and basically if we believe in a universal flood that wiped out everyone except for Noah and his family, then you have all of humanity descending from Noah and his family, and Noah practiced that. So considering oral traditions, and I don't necessarily mean the church's oral tradition, but Jewish oral tradition, any oral tradition, because that's a very common, it's not unique to the church, oral tradition is widespread as well. So those stories get handed down, those practices get handed down generation after generation. It's not unique to Judaism, it's not unique to
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's the thing I'm struggling with, is like, I need to account for the fact that this could also be explained by the human behavior of ancients,
So
handing down their traditions and their practices generation after generation.
I mean, but if it all goes back to Noah, is that any less innate than sort of the other way to understand it, that there's something within us that desires? I mean, in some sense.
Is the idea that it's innate, kind of make it so it's not coming from God? Because if God implanted that, if that's part of our nature as human beings, then maybe that's just part of who we are. As images
Yeah.
of our maker. But I guess when you ask how do you see it in your own life? I mean, I remember as a kid doing things for my parents. And yeah, giving these little gifts that are useless, but are very, like, somehow I thought this was going to fix something that was broken, or that it was going to please them, right? And obviously, and so, nobody told me to do that, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jed, I was thinking the exact same thing, like from a familial sense, like Tatiana's always giving us like just random trinkets or books or even her food, like just, like obviously I know what she's thinking, like doing that, like we're not even necessarily playing with this object, she'll just start dumping stuff on her lap, and,
Right.
just kind of like hair, So there does seem to be sort of this, you know, obviously I don't know the intention behind it, but, you know, sometimes she wants to play, but other times just like, here, have it.
But as I get older, and now now there's things are scarce and I'm worried, you know, I don't wanna really give anything. I have to kind of counteract that. But I still, I mean, I still wanna give, if I wanna please somebody, I you know, wanna think about what can I give them. So I don't know, I still don't know how, I wonder if we're so far away from sacrifice that we've actually lost something. Like, we don't even really know what, cause you look,
Definitely in our decadent modern culture, you know, right, but, I mean, there are still places in the world where they literally, like, you know, like the Hindus, the Buddhists and whatnot, I mean, they're, you know, I mean, and like to us, we kind of look at that and think like, oh, that's funny, but, I mean, really, it's like, it's the spirit of what we're reading.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Even though it's a false god.
I mean, walk into a Chinese restaurant that actually still has booze, and like, there's a little Buddha, and there's an apple, and there's a cigarette, and there's like $4, and it's like, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's it, I'm intrigued by, I mean, I think there's a point there that maybe our culture, being as narcissistic as we've become, has suppressed that innate,
Yeah, that,
you know, that
that's
it's,
an interesting thought.
yeah, I mean, that's another possibility. That may be one I'm having a struggle.
So doesn't necessarily make it right, like, you're not doing it right every time, we just have a desire to do this, right?
Right,
I just feel like it's more like a learned behavior.
well, that was what I was getting at.
I really think we teach our kids, you know, in small ways, and then in bigger ways. And for me, I don't remember ever having, you know, the desire to give something to God. It's always been a very hard thing, not easy, you know, making that choice and saying, okay, I can let that go, you know, or I can let this go, I can live with it not being the way I expected, you know. So, you know, I wonder about what, you know, what did God put in a little tiny baby, you know, you don't know that. But when I look at them, they're pretty me-centered, you know. At least, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it's probably more often than not the case that we get it wrong, you know, and that those that do it with the right spirit are fewer and far, you know, more far between. I remember this really cute story that this old, where he's still at Calvary Chapel as pastor, was telling the story about his son that wanted to, he had like a balloon or something, and he wanted to give the balloon to God, so, you know, he let it go. I mean, just a cute thing, like, I just want to give God a balloon. And I remember thinking, I was like, well, that's so ridiculous, but it's cute, you know, I mean, but you don't hear about that kind of thing. I think, like, you know, like, what was it say, I think it's in Genesis or something, like, Abraham plants an oak for the Lord, and I think it was maybe the oak of Mamre or something like that. Plants God an oak tree, like that, it just seems weird, but, you know, like, I don't know, I guess maybe those kinds of, that kind of spirit is maybe more the exception, like, we have to really learn and strive for it.
I keep coming back to this idea, and I don't think, I'm gonna say it, even though I don't really think it'll have anything, I don't know, it may not give any benefit, but I had a cat once that left a dead bird on our doorstep every single night. Like, it's amazing that there were any songbirds left. And it's like, I do feel like, I don't know, there was something innate within her that, like, she knew from whence her help came. And like, for some, she killed for sport because she was fed by us. I don't know, I don't know. I think that's mostly a meaningless comment, but.
Actually, it's not, Cause I've had that same experience with the cat that we had. Didn't need to kill, we killed during
Yeah,
the front door.
Oh, yeah, no,
Not the back
always,
door,
yeah,
the
so
front door.
that was when we still had like the paper, and so you'd walk out barefoot and step on a dead bird.
Ours brought us a lizard still alive inside the house.
So is there something, I mean, even if we're maybe not perfectly, like when we, for instance, tithe or offer something of ourselves to God. I mean, I think particularly with the tithe, because it's something that God does actually ask of us specifically. Isn't there something to obedience itself, even if you are imperfectly offering it? That what I am offering to God is my obedient heart. Even if I'm not feeling anything, or even if I'm struggling to trust, or even if I'm, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, imagine you have 12 baby goats this year, you know, and, you know, you go through and you're frustrated that you have to walk all the way to Jerusalem with this baby goat, and, you know, that you're gonna sacrifice, but you go through and you do the normal steps and you choose the best one, the one without any blemishes or broken legs or, anything like that, and yeah, I mean, I think that's, I don't think that's the same as Cain's offering. I guess I'll say that. Like, it's not done with a completely pure heart. But it's still done right. You know, and I think there's something there, and so you're in one sense at least acknowledging that God's ways are, that you're gonna follow God, even if you don't do it with a completely pure heart, if that makes sense. Great attitude, with a great attitude. Like for, you know, when I tell my daughter to clean her room and she balls her fists and like walks back there and starts cleaning, it's like, I don't know, at least it's getting done, like, I mean, I'm not gonna go and correct her right now.
Because there's, you know, the parable of the person that says, yeah, I'll go, and then doesn't.
Mm.
The person that says, I won't, but they do.
And then just, yeah.
So what is in that?
I mean, I think there is something in that. I mean, I probably can't exactly pinpoint it with great words right now, but I think there's obedience for the sake of obedience. But that's acknowledging who God is. So on some level, you get it.
There's that one story in the Old Testament where Saul was pursuing David. I think he's hiding out and they're kind of under siege and there's no great indication they're gonna win. And he just says something about, oh, if I only had a drink of water from the well at, I don't know, Jerusalem. And four of his mighty men hear that and they think, let's go, men. And they take off through enemy lines just for a glass of water facing life and limb and death and all kinds of stuff. And they bring it back to him. And he says, I will not drink the blood of my brothers. And he pours it out. I have never understood that. This book is kind of helping me sort of along that line. But they understood something. Because the Old Testament and the New Testament people would read that, oh yes, that is so good. And it's so good, and they're like, no. You went to a lot of trouble for that glass of water, buddy. Come on, drink it at least, come on. Like, no. It was the right thing to do, pour it out. But to Judd's point, we've lost a ton of sensibility of what sacrifice is supposed to feel like, be like, smell like, taste like.
Well, so moving to chapter 5, the basics of Mosaic sacrifice. I mean, I'll sum up some of these questions. what surprised you? Did anything surprise you? Maybe that's better. I mean, I'll go, like, I've heard this a dozen times, but and again, today being Yom Kippur, it bears reminding, is that nobody dies on the Day of Atonement. Like, that's, you know, I mean, it's not death.
So I don't know how to ask the question, but, I mean, obviously, real Protestant from the church. I didn't come in and say, was the sacrificial system different in the Orthodox eyes, or, you know, so maybe I've always just assumed it's kind of the same as what I grew up with. Is this like the standard, like, when you're taught in seminary, is it more this way, or is it?
I don't really go over this much.
Okay.
I mean,
Because it seems like a big, like, hey, everything.
so I will,
Sacrifice and the guilt that you've always been taught as a.
yeah, I will say this, this is very patristically rich. And so if there's been some divergence, you know, there's certainly been some divergence, but, Father Jeremy, you know, one of the things he did when he was kind of starting off, even just researching this, he didn't have the idea of the book before this, was he just was like, what do the fathers say about this? And he actually, this will surprise you all, but there aren't a lot of translations, English translations of patristic commentaries on the book of Leviticus, because most of the time nobody cares. So he started reading the Greek, he started reading them in Greek, and particularly St. Cyril of Alexandria. And he kind of just had to say, well, this is a real paradigm shift from what I understand sacrifice to be. So the answer is yes, it is what the church teaches, if by the church we mean the fathers.
But it's not something like we're consistently taught, like you weren't
Yeah.
taught it in seminary, like, it was taught the Old Testament survey.
Yeah, Old Testament survey didn't really dive down into this. Although there was great, have you ever listened to the Lord of the Spirits podcast?
Listen to the first couple of years.
They've got like a 3-part series on like sacrifice and Mosaic sacrifice that actually pairs really nicely with this book.
Nate Placentia just actually recommended that to me on Sunday, so
Oh, yeah.
I haven't listened to it yet. I'm driving to work tomorrow, so I'm good.
Well, and they actually pair up really nicely. Father Stephen DeYoung was when he submitted this to Ancient Faith. If I get my story right, he was one of the reviewers. Like, does Ancient Faith want to take this on? And he messaged Father Jeremy, and he's like, anytime anybody has a question, he's like, I'm just going to point them to this book. This is great. This is a super good resource. So yeah, that podcast kind of falls right in line, and it is. They talk for a long time on that podcast, so like that's like 6 to 8 hours worth of stuff. But you have a commute, so it's so that's good. What else?
Well, I was looking at my notes on the margins here to kind of refresh my memory, and on page 77, he talks about the criteria for sacrifices. And I wrote, my offerings to God need to be the first, finest, foremost, and freely given.
Well, you could have been a preacher. It's all alliterated.
He was a preacher.
I used to be.
Oh, no way.
So, it's all right. It wasn't information you needed to know. But, so, but, you know, as I pondered that, I realized that that's my goal. Because the reality is, I've been inadvertently trained
Yeah.
to do things out of obligation, and out of my laziness. I do things as a afterthought or as a leftover kind of stuff. So, I mean, this is really the heart, for me, that was the heart of what I've been pondering since last week, or the last couple of weeks, actually, because I was, which is why I made the comment to you, I mean, last week.
Yeah.
And then also on page 79, he talks about the offering's moral symbolism, and I wrote this question to myself: moral defects keep us from God? Question mark. Because I realized that it's not the tithing, that's not the real issue, or the coming to church or doing the fasting or any other things I do out of my legalistic bent
Right.
to
Right.
check off the box on my little checklist. Am I a good Christian? Do I do all these things?
Yeah.
It's this whole thing of being free of moral defects, so I can present my body, as Paul says, to
Yeah.
present our body a holy sacrifice to God. So it just, again, this kind of stuff just really flipped me upside down my head, as it were, to realize that for whatever reason, and I'm not saying that someone didn't say something like this before, but just reading it, it just seemed like, wow, I've been looking at this like wrong.
Well, and I never made the connection. I'd always been taught that the scrutiny paid for, like in the scrutiny within the sacrificial system was all to teach us that God was set apart. That's fine. Like I don't know that necessarily. I don't know that that's certainly not untrue, right? That God is holy, and that He's completely set apart, and that only the pure offering is acceptable to God. And but the point about the scrutiny within the sacrificial system actually, the careful attention to the animal's physical condition would have prompted the offer, or was supposed to prompt the offer to pay attention to his own moral condition. And so, you know, and perhaps it's just two different angles at the looking at kind of the same thing, looking at the same thing through two different angles. But for me, it was always like, no, this is to teach us how pure and holy God is.
Exactly.
And this opened up kind of a whole new world.
Exactly.
Uh,
That's what I was trying to say.
Because it's like, no, this is also like, you're going to your little herd of goats and finding the best one, and I mean, you're going over every little bit of it, you know, no uneven legs or anything like that for certain sacrifices, and this is to teach us how to approach our own virtues and moral condition.
And I also extended, as I was thinking about what you just said, it was the thing about the moral defects, but I also extended it to the whole concept of being properly prepared for communion, for Eucharist. Because I need to go to confession after doing self-examination. So I may not be going around trying to find the lamb that is perfect and has no defects. I'm not doing that today.
Right.
But what I am doing is setting aside time to be alone with God and do a self-examination to identify the defects that are in me, so I can go to confession, give them to Jesus, so He can heal me of my defects, so I can have the body and blood of Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of where my brain went. It's like, I can't do this. Like, you know, like the disciple said, who can be saved then, right? With man, it's impossible. With God, all things are possible. And just like started making connections about why Paul said, I can do all things through Christ, who strengthens me. So I'm realizing that, you know, that's how I need to approach this. I need to approach this from the standpoint, I need to be real with God about that I cannot offer myself up as a unblemished person.
Right.
But I can offer myself to him to make me worthy, the unworthy, as we say in the prayers, to have the body and blood of Christ.
It's good.
Sorry for the homily phrase.
No, that's good. You were a peak preacher. I had no idea. All right, so next week, let's read chapters, oh no, next week, tell you what, I'm a nice guy, I'll give you a week off. Next week, we'll have, this evening, we'll have an evening liturgy for St. Jacob Pamatura. We'll follow that up, that'll start at 5 for Orthros, 6 to 6:15 for liturgy, and then we can celebrate his feast day with a non-Lenten potluck afterwards, for those so inclined. And so the week after, we'll follow this with chapters 6 and 7. Okay? All right. Let's pray. It is truly meet and bless thee, O Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure in the rock God, more honorable than the cherubim, more glorious being compared than the seraphim, thou who without corruption gets birth to God, the Lord of true Theotokos, we magnify thee. Amen. That was good.